Let's now bring in Nina Easton. She's Washington editor and columnist for Fortune magazine and a Fox News contributor, and Jamie Weinstein, senior editor for the Daily Caller. Nina, will it work?
Well, I think the courts will decide that. But what's going to work politically in the short term, at least, is that Republicans, with this election coming up, they get Obamacare back on the plate. They get back in the headlines because it's kind of receded as a major issue, driving force in their prospects of taking over the Senate. And by the way, there's this other court case that we should be watching in the appellate courts, which will also challenge Obamacare. A ruling coming out on that soon about whether you can subsidize people in states where there is not a federal setup. It's just a state exchange. That's another big case to watch.
So why are these important, and why the issue of suing the president over this constitutional prerogatives? Why is that important?
Well, the question is, what can Boehner do? Boehner sees a president that he thinks has exceeded his authority. There is powers within the House to do something about that. One is impeachment. One is to cut off funds. But Boehner doesn't think that the president's violations have exceeded the high crimes and misdemeanors standard for impeachment. And, trying to defund Obamacare didn't turn out very well last time. So this is what he sees as his only route. Now, you ask, can it succeed? And that's a very tricky question. In the past, congressmen have brought in lawsuits individually against the White House, and that has failed, saying it lacks standing. What Boehner is trying to do is get the Congress, the House of Representatives itself, to kind of put their own imprimatur behind this lawsuit, saying it's the House itself. And that has not been done before. So we're going to have to see how the courts play out.
So, Jamie, let's say if the House does vote on this and they do pass this, does the president have a point when he says that George W. Bush and Bill Clinton issued more executive orders than he did, and they weren't sued?
Well,
they did.
That might be a case, but that's not actually what Boehner is arguing here. He's not arguing merely the numerical number of executive orders that any president has issued. He is saying that President Obama has changed laws, that has exceeded his authority, that he has the power to do executive orders, but what he has done is beyond that power. And the courts will decide, if they take this case, whether that's true or not.
So, Nina, it is a constitutional issue. Yeah.
And I think it's a Highwire game for both sides, because if the House prevails, then Obama will obviously his powers will be restricted, and he'll also be forced into negotiating over Obamacare with the House, which is what they really want. But it's also a risk for the Republican Party, because if the courts rule against it, you could end up with more of this so-called Imperial Presidency that they're really worried about.
And what about that issue of the Imperial Presidency? I mean, so they would argue, Nina, I would imagine, these are some regulatory fixes that the president is actually not really changing the law, although the Republicans say he certainly is.
Yeah, well, what he's done is he's made, of course, as we know, all sorts of exceptions and delays to Obamacare, basically to soften the blow. And so House Republicans are arguing that that's not just issuing an standard executive order, that's actually rewriting the law. And again, that's something that the courts will have to decide. It's a big moment.
And Jamie, if the courts do side with the Republicans ultimately, what does that mean for the future of Obamacare, but also for the future of our republic?
Well, it would be a big moment as a precedent, because they haven't done this before. As I said, individual congressmen have sued. They've been thrown out for standing. If the courts allow this case to go forward and then side with Boehner, that will, put the power more back into the legislative side. Over the last, 80 years, you've seen the executive get more and more authority, and this would be a move to weaken the president's authority and put it back in the legislative court.
So, Jamie, and I'll ask Nina the same thing. What do you predict will happen?
I don't know. Well, I think it's a novel legal theory that they're testing here. There's a lot of experts say they have no chance. But, a lot of people said Obamacare's lawsuit had no chance, and it became within an inch of being overturned by the Supreme Court. So I don't think that this has no chance, as some suggest.
Yeah, Nina, what happens if this comes to the Supreme Court? You got John Roberts stepping in again. What do you think will happen in the lower courts? Can it get to the Supreme Court?
The one thing that I think the Republicans have going for them is that the court has moved to restrict powers. I mean, we just saw the latest court case where recess appointments done in the manner in which the president was doing them, in other words, defining what a recess was not okay. So they do have that going for them in going into this case.
All right, Nina and Jamie, thank you. Really is a fascinating constitutional issue, a confrontation between two of the most powerful branches of our government. And it gets back to what the Founding Fathers had in mind way back when. Thank you.